Greetings everyone. Today I bring you a new video with truly terrifying stories that won't let you sleep. If you enjoy these stories, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, because these stories deserve it, and comment from which part of the world you're watching us. I'd rather not say exactly where I live, but that's where it all started, in my own house. Like a lot of homes, ours is split into 2 floors. I used to sleep downstairs, but over time, I started feeling uneasy down there. A tension in the air that I couldn't name and couldn't shake. Something that just wouldn't let me rest. So I switched rooms with my brother. He took the downstairs bedroom, and I moved up to the 2nd floor. Not long after, my brother told me he could hear a child crying at night, coming from somewhere in the lower level of the house. The days passed, but instead of fading, things got worse. One night, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when, for no apparent reason, a wave of dread came over me. Not anxiety, not the usual restlessness. This was something different. A fear that felt like it came from outside of me, pressing in. Something made me look at the closet. I don't know what compelled me. I just turned my head and looked, and there, against the closet door, I could make out a white shape, pale, undefined at first, slowly gathering itself into the form of a child. A small boy. His expression was deeply sad, but the image was so washed out, so bleached of detail, that I couldn't make out anything beyond the outline of his face and the weight of that sadness. I pulled the covers over my head and waited for morning. I told myself it wouldn't happen again. I was wrong. 2 nights later, the fear returned exactly the same way. That creeping dread settling over me without warning. And seconds later, the boy was back, standing in the same place, watching me. After that second time, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I told my mom everything. She suggested we pray together, asking for whatever was holding that child here to find peace and move on. For a while, it worked. The appearances stopped. I started to breathe again. With some distance from it all, I decided to look into the history of the land our house was built on. I didn't find much, but what I did find was enough. The property, many years ago, had been part of a large estate, and the people who lived and worked on that land had buried their dead nearby, in the surrounding grounds. I filed that away and tried to move on. Then one night, weeks later, just as I was drifting off to sleep, the dread came back. And the boy came with it. But this time, the image was sharper, more defined. I could see his eyes clearly now, dull, lightless, fixed on me with an expression that wasn't quite blank and wasn't quite grief. Something in between. Something that had been waiting a long time. We decided to call a priest. We asked him to come to the house and bless it. By that point, I was so unsettled that I stopped sleeping in my room entirely and moved to the living room couch instead. In the early hours of the morning, I heard it. A sound, distant at first, like a child crying far away. But it moved. Slowly, steadily, it got closer, until I could feel it right beside my ear, close enough that I could sense the breath behind it. I don't know where I found the courage, but I asked out loud what he needed. What was he looking for? What would help him? I immediately regretted it. The crying turned to screaming. My name. Over and over, desperate and raw, screaming my name from somewhere just inches away from my face in the dark. I called for my parents. They came into the living room immediately, and even though they couldn't see anything, they spoke directly to whatever was there. Firmly, calmly, they told it to leave, to stop, to let me be. That night was the last time the boy appeared. Since then, I've been able to sleep again. The house feels different now, not entirely at peace, but quieter, like something has stepped back, except sometimes, late at night, I hear it coming from the living room, the sound of marbles rolling across the floor, as if a child is still there, in that room, playing quietly, waiting for someone to finally help him find his way home. I moved into my apartment not long ago, right next to Riverside Park, one of those places families go on weekends to walk, jog, or just sit near the water. From my window, I have a clear view of the reservoir that gives the park its name. It's a genuinely peaceful spot during the day. The problem is, I've never had great sleep habits. I stay up late, always have. And it was because of that, because I was still awake at 2 a.m, watching something on my laptop, that I heard it. The dogs in the neighborhood started barking all at once. That kind of barking you don't ignore. Frantic, urgent, all of them going at the same moment, like something had triggered every single one, and then cutting right through it. A sound that made every hair on my body stand up. A woman's cry. Not a scream, not a shout. A long, low wail. The kind of sound that comes from somewhere deep and doesn't stop. And it was coming from directly outside my window. I sat completely still for a moment, unable to move. The wail slowly began to fade, growing distant, drifting away. And that's when I made the decision I probably shouldn't have made. I got up. I walked to the window. I pulled back the curtain. She was there, on the sidewalk alongside the park, moving slowly in the direction the sound had gone. Except the sound was already far away, which made no sense, because she was right there, just across the street from my building. She was dressed entirely in white, a long dress or gown that covered her completely from the neck down. Her face was hidden behind both hands. Her hair was dark and loose, falling to the middle of her back. She was moving. Something about the way she moved was wrong. I watched for a moment, trying to understand what I was seeing. The dress covered everything below her waist completely, but I realized, gradually, with a growing horror, that there was no movement underneath it. No shifting of fabric, no suggestion of legs or feet working beneath the surface. I looked lower. She had no feet. She wasn't walking. She was floating, gliding slowly above the pavement, the hem of her dress hanging perfectly still, just above the ground. Nothing beneath it. I pulled the curtain shut. I ran to my bedroom, got into bed, and pulled the covers up. I lay there, listening, until the wailing finally faded completely, and the dogs went quiet. I haven't told my neighbors. I've only been here a short time, and I don't want to be the new person who starts talking about floating women in white dresses. I don't know if anyone else has seen her. I don't know if something happened at that reservoir once, if someone drowned there, if there's a story attached to that water that the locals know and don't talk about. I've been trying to go to sleep earlier since that night. It hasn't really worked, because every time it gets late and the building goes quiet, I find myself listening, waiting to hear whether the dogs start barking again. I'd rather not say which city this happened in, though some of you might be able to figure it out from the details. It was a funeral home. I worked there for a number of years, in a role that isn't for everyone. I was responsible for preparing the bodies before they were laid out for viewing. It's the kind of job that requires a certain disposition. You either have it or you don't. And with time, you do get used to being around the dead. You develop a professional distance that lets you do the work without being consumed by it. But there was one night that none of us who were there have ever been able to explain. It was the early hours of the morning. My two colleagues and I were getting ready to begin working on a body that had just come in, a man who had died from electrocution. He had been working and accidentally made contact with a high voltage line. The burns covered a large portion of his body. He had lost almost all of his hair. The three of us were on the other side of the room, preparing our equipment, organizing what we needed before approaching the table. We were focused on what we were doing, moving around each other in the quiet, practiced way you develop when you've worked a job like this long enough. And then we heard something behind us, a sound from the direction of the table. We turned around. The body was sitting up, not partially, not tilted, sitting fully upright on the table, the way a person sits up in bed in the morning. Now, and I want to be clear about this, we knew, intellectually, that something like this can happen. Depending on the manner of death, gases and muscular tension can sometimes cause a body to shift or move after the fact. It's rare, but it's documented. We were aware of it as a possibility. That awareness did not help us, because at the exact same moment that the body sat up, it made a sound, a long, low moan. Not loud, not dramatic, just a sound that had absolutely no business coming out of a dead man, rising slowly from somewhere inside that burned and broken body, like something exhaling for the last time. All three of us left the room immediately. We stood outside for nearly an hour. Nobody said much. There wasn't a lot to say. Eventually, we knew we had to go back in. The work still needed to be done, and we were professionals, even if our hands weren't entirely steady. We gathered ourselves and went back through the door. The body was lying down again, flat on the table, in the exact position it had been in when it arrived, as if nothing had happened, as if we had imagined the whole thing. Except we hadn't, because all three of us had seen it, and none of us had spoken about it, since in any way that suggested doubt. I left that job not long after. The building eventually became a restaurant, which operated for many years. It's been renovated since then, and is now a small shopping plaza. I don't know what goes on in there now. I don't know if the people who work in those shops have ever noticed anything strange. But if any of them are listening, and if they have, I think I'd understand why they might not want to talk about it.